So just who is Brian Matlock? Well, he's a Republican running in Kansas's GOP Senate primary, and he's calling himself a Republican Socialist. He's running on Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, and he wants a locally administered jobs guarantee. Now, a little bit more about him. He says that he's an economics student studying at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and he says that he really got into socialism by going on missions trips to places like Venezuela and seeing a lot of poverty and realizing that instead of people serving the economy should serve the people. Now, this is obviously really, really interesting, but let me just show you a tweet from him just so you can kind of, sort of get a taste of some of the things that he talks about, some of the things that he says here. You can see this quote here, this tweet here saying, quote, "Your right to live is far more important than your financial commitments to your landlords or your financiers. If you have lost work because of COVID-19, save your money for your survival and not for other people's returns on investment." Now, that tweet there is definitely something that I agree with, definitely something that I'm in favor of. Now, I'm really sort of curious. I would love to talk to him at some point. I have no idea how, but I'd love to talk to him at some point because I'm super, super curious, like what he would see as the differences, for instance, between Republican socialism and democratic socialism. I've always sort of referred to myself as a democratic socialist or a progressive or something of the sort. So I'm super curious what he thinks of the differences. Now, just going through some of the things that I've seen from him online, he seems to have an emphasis on local communities and how socialism could benefit local communities and how local communities can really bring up through socialism. I mentioned at the beginning of this video how he's in favor of a locally administered jobs guarantee as opposed to a federally administered jobs guarantee. Is that a kind of significant difference? I don't know. I don't know for sure. I would, have to sort of hear a little bit more from him in that instance. Now, the other thing that's really interesting here is, of course, that progressives have been having a debate for really since Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, whether or not it would be more effective for progressives to try to run in the Democratic Party, run people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, etc., and try to influence and reform the Democratic Party, or whether or not we should try to form a third party, something like the Green Party, or form our own, sort of progressive party or something like that. What approach would be better is sort of the debate that we've been having, but he's out here arguing, no, we should just also, or at least as socialists, also run in the Republican primary. So it's a really interesting debate, really interesting thing, and I'd be super curious what you think of this. Do you think that this is an effective strategy? Is this something that, could potentially work? I don't know, maybe. I mean, I think we should at least be open to it and at least think about it, at least consider it, and not just sort of dismiss it out of hand. But it's certainly an interesting, maybe not, but it's certainly interesting. Now, the other thing though is, of course, the Republicans are not just rolling over on this one. You can see right here, Republican Socialist was excluded from the debate. So obviously they were having a debate. Obviously, the GOP contenders having a debate, and they didn't let him in. They just ignored him, and apparently they didn't even respond to his emails. They just completely ignored him. So Republican Party is not rolling over. They're not going to let their party be taken over by radical socialists. But it's certainly so it's not super easy. But obviously my opinion on this is let the voters decide. Let the debate be open. Let him in the debate. I'm super curious what kinds of things I might be able to do to make sure that he could, be in the debate. I mean, even if you don't necessarily agree with this approach or this strategy, it seems quite clear that he should be allowed to be in the debate, and that voters should be able to make up their own minds. Certainly on board with that side of things. Now, another tweet which I want to show you, not here, another tweet sort of thing that I want to show you here is this is an interesting kind of question and answer which he had here. He says, the question here, let me make it bigger for you. It's an interesting reply here. He says, question, how do you respond to the concern among leftists that Republican socialism is or will become like other ideologies in the past that have attempted to fuse fascist elements with leftist elements like National Socialism or National Bolshevism? And then his answer here is to say, any organization struggles with being co-opted by reactionary elements, but there are things that help. For one, I am not playing into the simple enemy of my enemy is my friend nonsense. One of the things that has made such populist movements possible is something like anti-corruption or other sorts of broad populist rallying cry has to do a lot more with what you are against than what you are for. This allows for the creation of otherwise impossible coalitions. just like the anti-tax rallying cry in the Republican Party gets sort of broadly supported. Now, this is he also had some other things to say on that tweet thread, but definitely like super interesting response, super interesting analysis. Definitely a smart guy there. Definitely a smart guy. Very interesting take there. Now, the thing I do want to show you is because when I was first reading through his stuff, I was thinking to myself that he may very well be, sort of economically left, but what is his social positions? How is he socially? Well, when I was looking here on his issue page for immigration, he's in favor of extending citizenship immediately for all DACA residents, so just immediate citizenship for DACA, and he wants to abolish ICE. He says ICE needs to be abolished or at least seriously defunded and restructured. So at least on the social issues which are available on his page, he seems to be in favor of a lot of it, and he talks also about issues like racial justice, issues like racial justice and criminal justice reform. So seems pretty good from what I can see. Obviously, I would need to know a little bit more. I'm going to leave a link in this sort of in the description of this video to a donate page. So if you hear this and you're like, wow, this is definitely something I'm on board with, you can donate. Personally, I might need to hear a little bit more information before I would be committed to donate, though I am definitely already committed to the idea that he should be on the debate stage and people should be allowed to hear his ideas and should be allowed to consider things for himself. I've always said that, we need to have open democracy, and I don't like some of the way that how some parties try to exclude certain voices. But anyway, so again, I'm super curious about this. Let me know what you think about this. I'm not quite sure entirely how I think about some aspects of it. So let me know what you think about it down in the description or in the comments. The other thing, though, I do want to say is, this could be really good just for discourse itself, because if Republican socialism becomes like a kind of broad idea, then you have democratic socialists and you have Republican socialists, right, in people's minds. Then it becomes impossible for Republicans to use the attack of, oh well, that policy is just a socialist, it's a socialist policy, you're just a socialist, right? Then that attack becomes basically null. It becomes it doesn't work, right? Because people are like, well, there's a Republican socialist over here and there's Democratic socialist over here, and they would just sort of see it that way, right? So when Republicans try to attack Obamacare and say that's a socialist policy, it just wouldn't compute with people. They'd be like, well, what are you talking about? It's a socialist policy. Right? Like you couldn't just immediately conflate Democratic Party with socialism if there were Republican socialists and Democratic socialists. So to that extent, it definitely seems like the kind of rhetorical change which is, refreshing and possibly necessary to advance our democratic discourse. So anyway, those are just my sort of 2 cents on some of that. So but anyway, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.